Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your erstwhile host, Dusty O'Connell, returning from a relatively brief hiatus. It was not because a member of my own team sucker punched me in the face and broke my jaw in 2 places. No, I will not be out for 2.5 months convalescing. That was just a gift to Twitter, I think, that whole story.
That was amazing. That was such a good day on Twitter, which is great because the other day on Twitter was the next day on Twitter was so bad. Because you just talked about like how good J.J. Watt is and not how annoying J.J. Watt is. I like Twitter when we're talking about how like awful players are, not how like charitable and they give to everybody and they're great with fans. That's such a boring story. I want to know I want to talk about so J.J. Watt's pretty obnoxious, isn't he?
Right, so what if J.J. Watt squats like 8,000 pounds while he's single-handedly rescuing puppies from burning buildings and building hospitals with his own money? That's not interesting. I want to hear more about how Geno Smith threw the first punch, but it landed a few yards short.
Exactly, right? Yeah, exactly.
Well, and this was just like a throwaway line, but I was watching NFL Network the afternoon that the Geno Smith jaw story broke. And one of the announcers is like, well, we'd love to hear from Geno Smith, but his jaw is broken, so he won't be saying much for a while.
I love the fake hot takes on this were good. Kanye recorded an entire album while his jaw was wired shut, and Geno Smith can't throw a ball?
Well, he couldn't do that with his jaw not wired shut, so...
Yeah, it's just an excuse to play Fitzmagic, who, I should point out, has now, or will now, start a game for all 6 teams that he has been asked to play for, all due to injury.
So basically by default.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It gives a whole new meaning to the nickname Fitzmagic, right? Because it's very clearly voodoo magic that he's involved in. I think it was... Because, St. Louis, Bradford gets injured. Cincinnati, Palmer gets injured before he threatens retirement. And then after that, it's Buffalo, and J.P. Lossman gets injured. And then he keeps the starting job, which is even better. And then in Tennessee, Jake Locker gets injured because he's Jake Locker. And here in New York, the injury wasn't going to happen, so someone just punched Geno Smith out.
I know, Geno Smith was on pace for a healthy season. And so someone had to step in and make the Fitzmagic work, I guess.
I like to think in this case, it could be just Fitzpatrick was just one of those fight hype guys. He just every day he'd just walk up to this character, Adam Pollitt. He'd just walk up to him every day and be like, "Hey, so Gino never paid you back for that, huh? Weird. It was me, I don't know if I would let someone disrespect me like that, but yeah, you do you." And then he just walks away every single day.
Right? He's like, I heard Gino talking about how he had that $600 for weeks before he paid you back. He was proud of it. I mean, I maybe wouldn't put up with that shit, but you do you, man. You're above that. I can see that. You're being the bigger man here. And then Paulie was like, "I'll show you, bigger man."
Have you seen that picture going around Twitter of him running at the combine?
No.
He is so big. He is an enormous man. He looks like he eats deer.
Whole, just like
whole deer.
Starts biting into them. That's great.
Yeah, his thigh is about as big as my torso. So.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a huge ass man.
The bigger man, the biggest man.
You're right.
Well, now that we've been talking for a while, I suppose I could introduce you. I am joined once again by blogger extraordinaire, whose work you can find nearly all over the internet, our resident in-house analyst, Arif Hassan. I assume you are also doing better than Geno Smith at this current point in time.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can talk, I can walk. Basically, I have no injuries, so That's good.
Are you caught up on all your debts? Do you owe any of your friends $600? Have you paid everybody back in a timely way?
If I don't, I can take them. That's that's the key.
That is that's a good rule. I like that. Before we get into some news out of training camp, the focus of everybody's attention right now, we'll get the promotional stuff out of the way. Hopefully you've all purchased your copies of Arif's training camp guide. If you have not, you can certainly do that at NorseCodePodcast.com. The little hamburger menu in the top left corner has a link to a page where you can purchase said guide, which is still useful even though training camp is functionally over, as Chad Greenway has just posted a picture on Twitter of him with his Mankato hotel room bed stripped down. There's a great deal of background and statistical information on all the players who may or may not make the roster this season. It is an essential companion for any true Vikings fan throughout the regular season. So if you haven't picked up your copy of the training camp guide, make sure you do that. I want to take this opportunity to mention Lead the Way as well, Chad Greenway's foundation, and once again suggest to everybody that they kick a little bit of money Chad's way so that he can continue building Chad's lockers for children in hospitals all over the Twin Cities area. Give them something to do while they convalesce from childhood illness. Another foundation that is worthy of your contribution is the Mike Zimmer Foundation. Zimmer's father passed away recently, and some people had been asking what they could do to contribute by way of condolence, and Zimmer started the Mike Zimmer Foundation back in 2009 when his wife died unexpectedly, and I guess rather suddenly. I'm not sure what the circumstances surrounding that are, but anyway, that led to the founding of the Mike Zimmer Foundation, and Zimmer would like any, if you were considering contributing to any cause, Zimmer would like it to go to his foundation. You can also donate to Norse Code, although the preceding three causes are certainly more worthy, at least for the time being, at NorseCodePodcast.com.
At least for the time being.
For now, we'll all
find out that all of those charities have been used to fund illegal sex orgies in hotels, which is preferable to illegal blood orgies, but still not good for charitable contributions. In which case, when that happens, you should donate to Norse Code instead. We are very upfront about how the money is used to funnel legal sex orgies in hotels.
Not even in hotels. Actually, we pride ourselves on our frugality and occasionally host the orgies in our homes.
Occasionally, so long as we have all the appropriate cleanup materials. The point is that Norse Code will remain above board when it comes to using funds for orgies.
Exactly. Make sure you check out the Norse Code store later this season, where you'll be able to purchase a Norse Code branded sex tarp that may or may not have been used in a Norse Code home orgy. Have your own Norse Code home orgy.
So donate to those charities.
Yeah, until we find out about their mismanagement, please donate to those charities. But consider us as the holiday giving season approaches as well, because as Arif said, we are very clear about our intentional mismanagement of donated funds.
As the holiday season approaches 4 months from now.
Hey man, I'm pretty sure I saw a Christmas tree at Target.
Are you sure that wasn't just a tree?
Maybe. I don't know. Some exciting news to report on the podcast front. You are joining the crew of Purple for the Win for a regular spot through the regular season.
I'm joining Andy, and I don't know if I'm joining Di Murphy or if she's also just going to be a regular feature on a different episode of the podcast, because I think he's got 3 going a week, and that I'm going to be on like the Thursday or Friday one. It's just going to be, I think I'm on there for maybe 30 minutes a day, and he's just going to ask me questions, probably most not even related to the Vikings, if I know Andy. We're just going to talk, and I get to talk more about football, which I always like to do.
So it's going to be like this show, basically, but shorter, and with a different host.
Right, but you're better Don't worry.
Better at what exactly? You don't have to answer that. That's okay. I don't need on-air
making me answer that.
At any rate, make sure you check out purpleftw.com for Arif's takes on, I guess, things that are and both are not football every Friday. Man, he's really dedicated to this little podcast empire of his. Can you imagine if we attempted to put out 3 shows a week? Like,
no. In fact, we even bantered the idea a little bit in the off season where we would record the same amount and just edit it so that we'd have 3 different shows, and then we kind of abandoned that idea because it is additional work, even though it is easier for you, the listener.
Well, that, I believe, takes care of all the promotional nonsense. We've managed to alienate nearly all of our listeners. For those that remain, we've got some hot and fresh training camp news for you. Today, practice ended a little early. Mike Zimmer apparently was not thrilled, is a charitable way to put it, with the performance of the team in the morning workout. So he took a page out of everybody's least favorite high school coach's playbook and made them all run a lap before sending them home 15 minutes early.
Yeah, Chad Greenway said that he was never forced to run laps since high school. So yeah, it's basically I've never seen that at a training camp before. Well, not that I've been to like 40 years of training camps, but that was a unique situation.
So Zimmer gave like a really short, like 3-minute press conference after the aborted practice, and I mean, you kind of are left with the impression that he felt like the Vikings were, kind of as a team, acting childish, and so he treated them in what he believed to be an appropriate fashion for their maturity level. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, he restrained himself from using swear words in the presser. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have just called the team dog shit and moved on. But yeah. It was pretty awkward to actually be there at the presser because it's your job to ask questions, get quotes, and produce a story. And so you have to ask questions, and it's like you kind of don't want to ask this dude questions. So people are like, well, I mean, like maybe it's sort of like a last day at camp sort of thing. You know, do you think maybe you're fighting against that? And he's like, good teams don't do that. And you're like, well, okay, yeah, that's okay, fine. Good point, Coach Zimmer. It was just like that. And then he asked at some point, like, I think a minute into the presser, he's like, those all the questions? And most of us were probably just like, that should probably be all the questions. But then we asked a couple more anyway.
Well, I've got more, but we can be done. That's okay.
Yeah. And then the second time he's like, are there any more questions? The PR guy there was like, nah, that's it. We're done. And then we all breathed a sigh of relief. That was probably the most awkward presser I've ever been to. I mean, it produced some great quotes. My favorite had to be, John Krasinski from the Associated Press was like, hey, so, maybe when practice isn't going well, or, players aren't taking it seriously, you maybe rely on your veterans a little bit to, get the team going. And he goes, I rely on my size 10s. Like, oh my God. What an amazing presser, but super awkward to be in.
It's true. That is one of the most badass things I've ever heard anyone say. Well, I mean, not that I heard him say it, but one of the most badass quotes that could ever be attributed to anyone.
Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, that's the news coming out of camp today.
So they're coming back in the afternoon, right? Like they're at least gonna, sit down and talk this out, right? Like that would be kind of a weird way for training camp to just like end, right? Yeah,
I assume that whatever the problem is, the players will try to get it fixed by the time walkthroughs start. But I mean, it's like, why? That was the last practice of camp, so you can't really like extend training camp one more day so that you could leave it with a good taste in your mouth. I think that's kind of it. Training camp ended shitty. That's the news.
But I mean, when dealing with children, it is not practical to assume that you can, give them exams or even try to teach them anything new on the last day of school.
I guess the thing is, school doesn't end here. Like, it's just like, I mean, they're just going to pack up and leave and then do a bunch of shit back at Winter Park. Like, that's what's happening. So, you can teach them something new, and then you can go to sort of the where it'll be for the others. So it's more like there was like an extended school trip more than, if we're going to stick with this analogy, more like an extended school trip where it just ends trying to teach them something new and it didn't work. So they have to go back to school and teach them that thing.
So there's like a gut check moment, basically. Like, you kids screw around too much, quit screwing around.
Yeah.
That's fair. Well, at least Zimmer put his size 10 stamp on it with authority. I think it's good to see a coach that gets genuinely upset when his team does not do what good teams do.
Yeah, I'm usually not a guy that's super into like the rah-rah of trying to read whether or not a coach is good based on how he communicates with the press or his body language or whatever, because there's like 8 million different coaching styles and all of them are good. But it is definitely refreshing to see, and I think that it's true that there are definitely coaches that take it maybe a little bit too easy on their players. And, again, sometimes that works. Bum Phillips, there's a really good piece by Chris Wessling today at NFL.com about Bum Phillips. Bum Phillips took it maybe easier on his players than any other coach in the history of the NFL, and they had some freaking phenomenal teams, in like 78 to 81. Just great, great teams. In part, he thinks because of how easy he took it on the players. It's still like, I think that Zimmer was thinking, well, I don't know what he was thinking, but, I think that one of the lines of thought that he could have been thinking, something along the lines of, there's not really a day that you can take off because the last day of camp is just as important as the first day of camp, if not more important because I've done more install. And so, yeah, if you're shitty, he gets mad, and that's a fresh change of pace. From Frazier, where you had like no idea what was going on because he was always like happy with the players.
Oh, everything's fine. They're doing great.
Yes, Frazier definitely had a Minnesota accent. You're right.
So you wrote an article, well, I guess a page from your notebook covering the last week of training camp before its abortive end, and it in traditional Arif style, it's pretty exhaustive. You managed to put together a depth chart as best as you could observe, and go through most of the positions. Kind of mention some winners and losers. My favorite takeaway from the entire article is that Jerick McKinnon is a dogshit pass protector. Your words, not mine.
Well, he performed like one. I mean, that's not like determinative. That's just how he did.
It's true, but it is the only sentence in the entire notebook that is its own paragraph.
Yeah, well, it needed to be emphasized.
There you go. So I think everybody agrees that Stephon Diggs is a big winner in training camp, and you are, of course, high on Adrian Peterson, who appears to have not aged a day in terms of athleticism and the skills that we have, come to appreciate from him. Who do you think has flown under the radar a bit, but still is worthy of high expectations for the season?
If you want to talk about players who are starters that have flown under the radar, I've been talking up Linval Joseph every day, so maybe he hasn't, but I think, in terms of the coverage that he's getting from a bunch of places, I would put Linval Joseph up there. I think he's been having, frankly, a phenomenal camp. I think he might be having the best camp out of all the defensive linemen. And that's definitely no insult to the other defensive linemen, because Griffin was having a good camp, Robinson's having a good camp, Floyd's having a good, but Joseph has been phenomenal. So out of the starters, I'd pick him. I think out of, maybe not as much the starters, maybe out of like the backups and stuff, Tom Johnson's been very good, which is nice to see given, his age and the fact that the Vikings just signed him. I thought Isom Fashon has been surprisingly good, given the fact that he just converted to the offensive line. So, yeah, it's easy to pick linemen as under-the-radar people because, no one ever talks about them unless they're Matt Khalil. But yeah, and I would pick them. I wouldn't say any of the receivers have gone under the radar that have been good. Like I said, Tavares Daniels is probably the best out of the receivers that are not in the top 6. But I wouldn't say that he's performing at the level of say, Tom Johnson. So, yeah, that's who I'd pick.
Big losers in training camp this season. I mean, are there... Well, I guess we can, kind of infer by who is low on the observable depth chart, who is least likely to make the team. Brandon Bostic, DeJuan Harris. Is there anybody that you would say is like on the bubble, or is I guess practicing for their lives, or a spot on the practice squad?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you could define loser in 2 ways. One could be, you lose by not being on the team, or you could lose by losing your starting job. So Blanton is probably a loser for today, given that he was like sort of yanked off the field in favor of Anton Exum. But I think overall, the losers in terms of retaining a spot on the roster or getting a spot on the roster, I'd have to think a little bit harder about that because probably Zach Line. I think that it's entirely possible that the Vikings do not field a fullback this year, and if they do, that's it for Zach Line. So I'd call him a loser, which is not to say he'll get cut, but I think he's at more of a risk of getting cut at the end of camp than he was at the start of camp, which I think is a pretty good way to define that. Other losers, I wouldn't say any of the receivers. I wouldn't say any of the quarterbacks because both Kafka and Heineke are on the bubble anyway, so they could get cut. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, well, I guess there's a bunch of offensive lineman losers. There's like a bunch of them. David Yankee was expected to compete for the starting guard position. I think it's pretty clear he's not going to do that. Which you could call Mike Harris a winner then. And then I think Yankees are potentially at risk of getting cut because of that. So I would probably call him a loser. Yeah.
What are Babatunde Ayegbusi's chances of making the practice squad or the 53-man this season?
His chances are the 53 is 0%. He has no chance. In terms of the practice squad, I think Ayegbusi's chances are dependent on the international exemption, whether or not it exists, because the rule may be a carryover from the last CBA, or it could be something they instituted last year when they expanded the practice squad rosters to 10. It's either or. I have no idea. I haven't gotten any clarification on it, so I don't know if the Vikings can use it on him. If they can, he's just a free practice squad spot, and so then he'll make it. If not, I don't think he even makes practice squad because there's a bunch of offensive linemen that probably deserve a spot on the practice squad. Definitely over a 27-year-old who doesn't know how to play the game yet.
Probably the worst player in camp, which, when you've never played the game before is, I suppose, understandable.
Yeah, I don't want to keep shitting on this guy. It's been astounding what he's been doing, and he's improved, a significant amount. But, he's playing against NFL players, so, he's the worst in camp, but it's not like I hate the guy.
I know. I would love for him to succeed. He has such a unique story that I wanted to, at least mention him in passing. But yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't surprise me that not knowing how to play football is a hindrance to making an NFL team. Yeah,
we'll see. I think what's that running back from the rugby team is doing well. Jared Hayne in another camp. Was he with the 49ers or the Lions? He's with the 49ers because the 49ers are running out of running backs. Because Lattimore retired and Gore left, and they like dealing with international players. So yeah, Jared Hayne, maybe he makes that. I don't know whether or not he can make the team. That's for a Niners podcast, I guess. But we'll see if not knowing how to play football is really a hindrance to playing football.
If it turns out that you can overcome a lack of skill with size and strength, or probably not.
Probably not.
For some reason, I have this reputation as somebody who knows something about Vikings football, just because I own and operate a podcast that at least 5 people listen to, with at least one person who is not me on the show that knows at least 5 things about football. That apparently qualifies me as an expert.
Yep.
And friends and, barflies come up to me and they ask, well, how are your Vikings going to do this season? And I say, well, first of all, they're not my Vikings. They belong to cartoonish supervillain Ziggy Wilf. And then I say, well...
You know that the sense of ownership doesn't have to only include legal ownership, right? Like, don't be that asshole. Well, how are your Vikings doing? Well, I mean, they're not my Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, they're not.
Yeah, legally they're not, but I mean, you can claim a thing as fandom. For example, my Sir Patrick Stewart.
Now, see... or Michael Pruitt? No. Not that.
That was bad.
No, well, I would never try to claim ownership of the great Sir Patrick Stewart, because that just is patently ludicrous on its face.
I'm not claiming sole ownership of Sir Patrick Stewart, because you can't claim it, but you can claim, a stake in his projects and how he does from an emotional standpoint. In that sense, he's yours. Just like the Vikings, I have a stake in the Vikings performing well, and so they're my Vikings.
If any of these barflies or my friends had listened to the show, which they all tell me that they have not, then...
But they know you up... Well, maybe that's why they think you're an expert.
They've never actually... It's true, they don't know that that I just get on the show and make dumb jokes and talk about cooking and get everybody's names wrong. They don't know that I call them, your Minnesota Vikings, because we are the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings, and I think what I really...
and I assume that Ziggy Wolf is not the sole listener to the show. So...
I should hope not.
That would be fascinating.
Has he ever listened to the show? That's something to contemplate. At any rate, perhaps I should say they are our Minnesota Vikings, because... much like a national park does not belong to any one person, it is there for all of us to enjoy. The Vikings, I don't think, belong to any one person. They are not mine. They are not yours. If they are anyone's, they are Ziggy Wolf's Vikings. But beyond that, they are our Minnesota Vikings, because we all have a stake in their success. We all throw our hats when we lose to Miami on possibly the dumbest play that could be conceived of in an NFL game. And we share in that. But all these people ask me, this is the point of all this, all these people ask me, how are the Vikings going to do this season? And I tell them I am reasonably confident that they will win their division and then immediately lose in the playoffs.
That's bold. That's shockingly optimistic, despite it being centered around the concept of a loss.
Well, they are the Vikings. Let's not go crazy here.
Well, I just don't think they're going to win the division this year, that's all.
Well, then I would like to drill down a little further into that. Have you been paying much attention to training camps in our division, like our divisional opponents' training camps, and is there anything that you have seen or heard from our divisional opponents that makes you feel better about your conclusion as opposed to mine?
No. I mean, I have been paying attention, but, no, I don't think anything that happened in training camp is the reason that I think that the Vikings won't end up winning the division. I mean, I would be worried about Amir Abdullah. He's been doing pretty fantastically in Lions camp, so that's maybe a good point. But I thought he was good before he joined the Lions, so that doesn't surprise me or anything. And I'd watch out for the Lions, because I think the Lions will definitely regress defensively. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think there's much question about that, I should say. But I think that they'll improve offensively anyway, and I think they'll improve offensively more than they'll regress defensively, so they're still going to be a very good team. I think that the Vikings are more than capable of beating the Lions in the divisional race, but I don't think the Vikings are capable of not just beating the Packers one-on-one, but necessarily beating the Packers in a 16-game series against other opponents. I think the Packers are just a better team. So, I haven't heard much from Packers camp, except their terrible draft was terrible, which I already knew. I mean, they're excited about Ty Montgomery, so I guess that's not quite the conclusion coming out. And Aaron Rodgers is throwing a bunch of picks, but he throws a bunch of picks at training camp every year anyway, so that doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to stake it on Aaron Rodgers is good and the defense exists. So
they are as good as they were last year, which was good enough / better than the Vikings.
Yes.
Sunrise, sunset.
Hail Packers. Oh, did I say that on the podcast?
Oh God, we can fix in post. You can keep that dirty little secret to yourself, or maybe not. It'll be out of our hands.
It's all up to James now. When I get tarred and feathered by Ziggy Wolf, the lone listener to the podcast.
Yeah, right. They will be everyone's Minnesota Vikings but yours.
Right.
By the time this is over. Do we want to talk about the Hall of Fame game? I watched most of the recap, and it was interesting. It was fun to watch, but I mean, from a predictive perspective, there just doesn't seem to be much to it. There were a lot of second stringers playing with third stringers, playing against fourth stringers. I mean,
yeah. Well, there's the takeaways. It's not like there's going to be predictive power to it, but there are takeaways. I think, despite the fact that the Vikings' first team offense was not against the entirety of the Packers' first team defense. I mean, there's still a lot of the. Did I say Packers? I meant Steelers. Did I say Steelers or Packers?
You said Packers, but I
meant Steelers.
You meant Steelers. I know you always have the Packers on your mind, so I was just going to let it slide.
No, the Steelers did play a bunch of their talented first stringers, but they didn't play, all of them, and in particular the ones you wanted to take a look at were the pass rushers, and they did not end up playing, I think, either of the first-team pass rushers, which is kind of important because Khalil had a good game. But, the Vikings didn't let a sack. The offensive line looked good, and it's good that they look good. It's just not super predictive. Because of who they played against and because it was one drive. But, it's better than it was worse. And I thought, some players did end up looking good. I thought, Tom Farniak, my guy, I thought he looked really good. Unfortunately, Tyrus Thompson, my other guy, he looked really bad. Really, really bad. Trey Waynes looked bad. Teddy looked good for his 6 throws in a scramble, I guess.
I was like, I saw that scramble and I was like, this is nice, and it would be cool if we could see this in the regular season. But he's not really scrambling against much.
Yeah, and the linebackers had vacated, and it wasn't against pressure; it was because of coverage. So, which is fine. But it
was a good slide.
Yeah, no, it was that's something he needed to work on. So, I'm glad to see that Teddy has improved on his slide. There were other players that looked good. I just can't remember them. If you went through the roster, I could definitely tell you if they played well in my eyes or not. Eric Kendricks, actually, he looked amazing, so I should point that out. He was phenomenal. He got a lot of people's eyes, actually. I got a bunch of tweets and DMs about Eric Kendricks. Some of them were like, "Oh, who's number 54?" And I was like, "It's Eric Kendricks." And they're like, "Oh my God, yeah,
he's the man."
But yeah, so that's what happened. The Vikings defense you didn't get much of other than Trey Waynes because the first team defense was out there for 3 snaps because they forced a 3-and-out against Landry Jones, which is not surprising.
Landry Jones, a lasty, the least trustworthy of all.
Wait, lasties are less trustworthy than the firsties?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, I would.
I can accept this. I just didn't think that was the hierarchy we had established.
I'm not saying it's a good idea, but I would rather lend $50 to Tom Arnold than to Landry Jones.
Oh, when you put it like that, yeah, absolutely. What about a lasty firstie? Did we discuss that?
I think we did. I think we put them somewhere in the middle.
So if it was Landry Benjamin, that was
still better than Landry Jones.
Okay. So
I would say. Terrible mustache on Landry Jones, by the way.
Yes.
Makes him look like a criminal.
Well, so did Matt Castle's and Aaron Rodgers', although less Aaron Rodgers somehow.
Is there any? I think that pretty much covered. Do we even want to talk about the Texas judge basically giving Adrian Peterson a get-out-of-probation-free card over the strenuous objections of the assistant district attorney.
It was kind of weird because, like, the judge ended up saying something like, yeah, you had 3 days to file your protest and you didn't. But, like, the DA office was like, it clearly looked like they were taken by surprise, so I don't know what happened there. But yeah, his probation ended early. I don't know what the story is. I'm sure he did, like, a lot of community service or something, so maybe that was it.
Well, he was probably already, done with his stuff, his community service and his classes and whatever, and that's, not an uncommon thing to have happen with probation. Is just, well, you fulfilled your responsibilities, and we're not interested in filling out more paperwork on your behalf, so off you go. But the district attorney's office released a statement to the effect that the judge was merely taken with, being able to adjudicate in favor of a popular football player, both locally and nationally, and that Peterson's fame was part of the deciding factor in him being let off probation early, which, may or may not have been true, but...
I feel like the only way you can make that statement is by going through the judge's, history of whether or not he lets people off probation early when they fulfill their requirements. Like, if he generally does not have that history, I think they've got a much stronger case for saying that. I didn't look up that history because I don't really care.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter that much, other than to say, hooray, Adrian Peterson is probation-free. He is off paper, as they say.
He's off the paper.
Wow, that's about it for Vikings news, right? We don't, we're not missing any, massive stories that are breaking as we speak. I mean, we caught we got
the Zimsplosion, so...
Zimsplosion?
Yeah.
Then let us mailbag, I suppose.
Yeah, let's do mailbag, because, any evaluation stuff, I'll just direct people to my notebook, so...
Yeah, you've been writing prolifically enough to where, if you want individual player evaluations, then we can just have that stuff in the show notes, and, or we could just direct people right to the Daily Norseman, because that seems to be where most of it is centered presently. Yeah. So, first question in the mailbag is from, speaking of the Daily Norseman, Eric Thompson. Why does Arif think Mike Wallace is Sean Prater?
So, I tweeted out that Jerry's right and Sean Prater at Pyology, and it was Mike Wallace, not Sean Prater. In fact, Jerry's right corrected me immediately on Twitter, which is kind of hilarious.
Oops.
And I was like, damn it, I did it again, because I asked Sean Prater questions that were intended for Derek Cox last year. And he was like, you think I'm Derek Cox? And I was like, oh my god, you're not Derek Cox. This is awkward.
See? It happens. It's embarrassing, isn't it?
I think it's just Sean Prater. I've been pretty good about, for example, Isom Fashion and TJ Clemmings and Tyrus Thompson, and I guess Phil Lodeholt, but you're never going to confuse Phil Lodeholt. They all have the same hair. They're all offensive linemen, but I can tell them apart pretty easily, especially Isom. But something about Sean Prater. I can't figure him out. Every other player I can get. I can tell all the white receivers apart too. It's pretty easy. But it's Sean Prater. I just can't get him. And I was talking to Jerry. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. He's like, no, it's cool. And I was like, Sean Prater still got the necklace thing. And he's like, yeah, it's true. And I was like, he has the same shaped head as Mike Wallace. He's like, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, he kind of does.
So, yeah.
He's just unremarkable. He's like the cooler, or the man without a face.
Yeah, he's like the man without a face. I wouldn't call him unremarkable because he kind of got upset when I confused him for Derek Cox. He, by the way, looks nothing like him.
Well, then that would be, yes, cause for consternation.
Yeah, no, the problem was it was the first day and Derek Cox just had an interception and I didn't know what he looked like. Obviously, I didn't know what he looked like. And Derek Cox walked out without his jersey on, and Sean Prater walks out with his jersey folded up. And he was wearing 27, and Derek Cox wears 37. And so he has jersey folded up, so I clearly saw the 7, and I thought I saw 37. But the 2 and the 3 look the same from if you just look at the top third of it.
I know, with the little, little wing on the top of it, yeah.
You take the cart?
Yeah, so that was... I'm sorry, Sean Prater. I think that you're a pretty reasonable football player, so
We think you're neat.
We think you're neat.
Certainly better than those guys that'll end up on the practice squad. Sorry, by the way, Sean Prater, I'm sorry, you're not eligible for the practice squad.
Oh boy. Luke Larson, at Larson DeMartian on Twitter, writes us with a question. What is the % chance that Patterson gets completely replaced by Stephon Diggs in all areas?
Pretty low. Prefer called Patterson the best kick returner in the NFL, so I think they're not even going to experiment with, especially because like Sherrills has been taking second-team kick return snaps. It's pretty unlikely that Diggs gets to replace Patterson in sort of every respect, especially because Patterson's usage pattern throughout camp in the past 2 and 3 years has been different than Diggs' usage pattern. Patterson is more likely to receive a deep route assignment. But yeah, I mean, they have similar athletic skill sets, so I can understand, that question. But Diggs is a better punt returner than a kick returner, and Patterson probably couldn't really return punts, even though I think he did at Tennessee. He probably he can't track the ball in the air, because punts are just super insanely difficult, which is why there are not enough punt returners in the NFL. It's also why Sherrills keeps having a job. So I wouldn't say that Diggs would replace him this year in every facet of the game. But it's possible, so I'm not going to say 0%.
What about?
I'm going to say very low.
What about receiving only?
I mean, they play different receiving rules, but yeah, I think had Diggs not been drafted and Patterson was the fourth receiver, those snaps that Patterson would have as the fourth receiver, Diggs is definitely going to eat into on similar route packages. So in that sense, yeah. But Patterson's still going to see the field, so it's not like Diggs is going to replace him outright, at least in year one.
So 0 it is.
Okay.
Another question from Luke. If Teddy was a 90s rapper, who would he be?
Okay, so I saw this in the mailbag, and I had to think about it because Teddy's not Aaron Rodgers, he's not Tom Brady, he's not Peyton Manning, so I couldn't just pick, I couldn't pick Chuck D, I couldn't pick LL Cool J, I couldn't pick Nas. Because those are like the elites, right? And
yeah, they're like icons. Teddy hasn't had a chance to really build any kind of legacy, much less cement it.
Right. So like Tom Brady is probably LL Cool J, right? I think that makes sense. Peyton Manning is probably Nas. Like I think those make sense.
I think Peyton Manning's more of an Ice Cube than a Nas.
Really? Because like Nas is known for. Less for his flow, though. He's kind of a total package, maybe. So maybe that's wrong. But a lot for his like storytelling, and so I don't know. That feels like it fits like accurate anticipation passing in my head. But it's not like he doesn't like. It's not a super aggressive beat all the time, except when he's trying to get at Jay-Z. He has some of the greatest individual tracks of all time, just like Peyton Manning has some of the greatest individual games and seasons of all time. But, there's some, Nas is not going to be remembered as the best rapper of all time, even though he's in the conversation. Same with Peyton Manning, who's probably the best quarterback of all time. Anyway, I didn't think this through, like, enormously. But
still, there's a strong foundation for, whatever your analysis is, it sounds like.
Right, and so I would pick DMC, from Run DMC, right? Not Reverend Run, who gets, a lot more press, because he's very good. But, Reverend Run, the lead vocalist, and did a lot of the production stuff, but he's, like, very versatile. Right? He's a very, very good businessman. He's very good. I wouldn't call Teddy, versatile, but I call him extremely good at what he does. So DMC, he's the backing vocalist. He's super underrated as far as 90s culture goes. Throughout his career, he changed his style to sort of fit who he was. And so, when he found out that, he couldn't be as aggressive on the vocals as he used to be because he had a condition, he changed his style, and it was incredible. He did an extremely good job. He had to deal with some issues early in his career, kind of like Teddy's pro day. And it didn't matter. He was incredible. So yeah. So I'm gonna pick Daryl McDaniels. I'm gonna pick DMC.
All right. I did not look at it the same way. I went with a much simpler comparison. I picked Montel Jordan just because they kind of look alike.
What?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they got the same chin, although Teddy doesn't have the the stripe goatee, the racing stripe that Montel Jordan was rocking a few years ago. This analogy would be better served if Teddy Bridgewater eventually leaves the NFL to become the pastor of a church. In his,
well, yeah, I mean, the same would have worked for like Reverend Run too.
Yeah, but I feel like the Reverend in Reverend Run is less important than his second career as a guy who has MTV cameras following him around.
Well, but I mean, he's a reverend. Like, he's a practicing minister.
I mean, so is Montel Jordan. He's the pastor of a church in Atlanta, Georgia. Victory World.
Right, that's why I said also. I didn't say instead. Jesus, man. Keep up.
I feel like the Reverend Run doesn't really do that much reverending, but that's just.
Oh, of course he does.
Have you gone to one of his services lately?
Well,
are you an acolyte of the Reverend Run?
When you add the qualifier lately, I'm gonna have to say no.
Have you ever? Wait, what? This is fascinating.
Well, okay, no, I've never been to one of his services, but you added the qualifier lately, which made it seem like. Well, Arif, I know you've been to his services all the time, but I mean,
when you were a child, you were a member of the flock, and I know you strayed away, hoping that you had gone back to your Reverend Run roots. Josh Dungan 1 on Twitter, actually, writes us, Karen versus Farniok, who wins?
This is so tough. So he's talking about center Zach Karen, 2014 undrafted free agent from Toledo versus Tom Farniok, 2015 undrafted free agent center from Iowa State.
Zach Karen Farniok, though, right?
I'm super high on Farniok, but he's behind the depth chart of Karen. Karen took first-team snaps at center when John Sullivan was out celebrating the birth of his child, and Berger was out with merely an injury. It's just, well, yeah, I'd figured, if you're going to put the two next to each other, it would sound kind of weird. John Sullivan was celebrating a momentous occasion in his life, and Berger was dealing with, like, a bruise. So Karen took first-team snaps at center, so it's very clear that the Vikings prefer him at center over Farniok. Karen has taken guard snaps, and so it is possible that, on the depth chart, he'd be kind of like Joe Berger, where he'd be listed as a backup guard, but he could play guard or center. And you have Farniok on the team. I think Karen wins. I think Farniok makes it to the practice squad, along with Ice and Fashawn, and or Tyrus Thompson. I don't think there's going to be more than two linemen on the practice squad, but if there are two, I would pick Farniok to be one of them, and then either Fashawn or Tyrus Thompson to be the other one. So yeah, I think Karen wins. I like Karen. It's just, Farniok's my guy.
Matt Beckendorf sends us a question by email. Thinking back to the offseason, around the time of the draft, could you have possibly thought the situation with Peterson would end any better than the way it worked out?
No.
I guess maybe if he hadn't bruised himself in training camp, that would be slightly better, but...
I think the situation with him ended before the bruise, so... You can't say that, really.
I guess.
It already ended, and it ended probably to the...
As well as it could have. It ended earlier than anyone, including the DA, thought it would.
Right. I mean, even on this podcast, we specifically said there's no way that this Peterson thing can end well, and it ended extremely well.
Yeah, I mean, we still have the camel picture floating around, but that, I mean, there's no...
I think that was one of the pieces of evidence we pointed to, like, when someone in this high-profile of a fight has that insane lack of self-awareness, like, there's no way it ends well.
Well, it turns out that he is still an astonishing world-class athlete and might have another year of elite-level play in him, so ride all the camels you want, Adrian Peterson. You're a free man now. Just maybe put down the stick and go in another room and count to 10 next time, huh? If you can find it in your heart. And a follow-up question from last podcast, or I guess 2 podcasts ago, when we engaged in the pen versus pencil debate. Do you prefer blue or black ink?
I don't have a strong preference, but it is black ink.
My personal preference is for purple ink. Believe it or not.
Oh my god!
I love purple pens. Although I realize they lack a certain professionalism. So if I had to pick a second choice, it would be blue. But again,
or its proximity to purple.
No, not necessarily. I just like the color blue. I just think black is like, I don't know. Everything else on the page is black. You gotta sass it up a little.
Sass it up, Jesus.
Add a little. What? Color is great. We don't live in a black and white world. I even dream in full color. Like, why wouldn't I want
I don't see color, Dusty.
Are you colorblind? I mean, like actually colorblind, not like racially colorblind.
No, I like I said, it's not a strong preference. I prefer black ink because A, it's slightly cheaper. B, it has slightly more applications. It's all very practical. It's slightly more applications. C, I'm used to reading my terrible handwriting in black. Reading it in another color is slightly harder.
All right. Because you don't see color.
Right, because I don't see color.
You have to not only figure out what it says, but what color it is.
It's all very like, what if it's the same color as the page? I can't do this.
I give up. Reading is hard. I will say, though, that I would use a black Pilot G2 over a blue, pretty much any other kind of pen, ballpoint or gel.
Well, I only use Pilot G2s, so yeah. I will I carry my pens around me everywhere, so like when I'm at a restaurant and they ask me to like sign something, I'll just pull out my pen instead of using their shitty pen.
Yeah, G2s are amazing. They work on those stupid thermal paper slips that you get when you're signing a credit card receipt. They work on regular paper. They work upside down. They work at high pressure and low pressure, and they come in purple. They come in
a wide variety of colors. And I actually do have multiple pen colors for G2s. I'm just saying if I have a slight preference for black, but I will use any color, and I'll use them for different reasons. So
a black G2 is superior to any color of any other pen. It's just they're just the best pens.
Yes.
And anyone who disagrees is wrong.
That's also true.
That's all I have to say about that. And I think that's actually all we have to say about the Vikings this week. Short mailbag, short news. Not quite as short as the Mike Zimmer presser, and not quite as angry.
But, we'll strive for that next time.
I think we
angry 3-minute podcast.
I think we left everybody listening feeling somewhat awkward and kind of mildly uncomfortable. So, I guess.
So mission accomplished.
Yeah.
We've achieved the standards of our previous podcasts.
And with that, I will give you the customary opportunity to plug any of your new projects or writing.
No.
You will, as usual, defer.
Yeah, it's in the show notes. That's sure.
Yeah. Make sure you check out the show notes. It'll have links to the latest stuff that Arif has been working on. Although, frankly, if you're at DailyNorseman.com, which hosts this fine podcast, then you've probably already seen it. At least the truly awesome stuff. Once again, please feel free to contribute to the Mike Zimmer Foundation or Chad Greenway's charity, Lead the Way. Is the contest over? Did Vikings Territory win?
The contest, I think, ends in 5 days, but it'd be very difficult for someone besides Vikings Territory to win at this point.
Well, you all can change that.
Only you have the power.
You pressed U, referring to me. That is incorrect. Indeed, you have the power to take the win away from Vikings territory.
At any rate, be sure to check out our website, NorseCodePodcast.com, where you can donate to the show if you take pity on us and our end-of-training camp struggles. Norse Code is on Facebook at facebook.com/Daily Norseman. Arif is at Arif Hassan NFL on Twitter. You can find our intrepid producer James at Big Mono, and he also manages the official Norse Code Twitter account, whose handle is at NorseCodeDN. Thank you so much for listening to this inauspicious episode of Norse Code. If Mike Zimmer were our boss, I feel like we'd be out running laps right now. For all of us here at the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings, I'm Dusty O'Connell, and our formula is this: we lead on our size 10s. See you next week.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.